So it's 10,000 pounds. So the Sunday Express, the Sunday Mirror, and the Mail on Sunday have identical headlines, similar to the Sunday Times, but these ones are closer to one another. And the Mail makes it the starkest, the Mail on Sunday. So what are they doing? They are not publishing anything new. They are just imitating one another. And there is a line that has been released by Boris Johnson appearing to be the man delivering the service. And the Observer too follows that. The Daily Star on Sunday is not following that. It is saying that our television is in crisis, and by that they're meaning by the state of comedy on television is in crisis. And then there is a piece about the UK's weather future. And there is a piece about a victim of the mass murderer, Dennis Nielsen. The victim is saying that the mass murderer was upset that this victim got away. And on page 7, it is saying the most ominous thing. It's saying hundreds of deaths every day here soon. Britain faces perfect storm. That's the piece inside the Star, Daily Star on Sunday. So why is it running that in the inside pages? And why with that headline? It's a chief reporter, Isobel Dickinson, is saying Britain could soon be facing hundreds of coronavirus deaths every day, said leading scientists. The warning is said to have spooked Boris Johnson into considering a second national lockdown, but sources say he may instead be planning to introduce short-term lockdowns for at least the next 6 months. it is thought the PM is set to announce a 2-week circuit breaker to tackle the ongoing pandemic on Tuesday. It would see blanket bans on all social contact between households and the closure of bars and restaurants. However, Britain is likely to need to reintroduce some national lockdown measures sooner rather than later, a former senior government health advisor said yesterday. That's Neil Ferguson. He said the country faces a perfect storm of rising infections as people return to work and school. So that's what is the reason. Return to school and work. What does it show? The perfect storm is actually connecting to the evidence of perfect unpreparedness and perfect lack of accountability. That is the whole running throughout the whole failures and negligence and the danger, the absence of accountability. As I have been saying, there is no culture of accountability. So therefore, there is no knowledge about the state of need to be prepared at any given time about any particular crisis or a particular kind of demand for service. And that is something that covers both the local councils, when it comes to local councils not being accountable to the local community generally on various services. And that culture of unaccountability translates into the so-called national culture of unaccountability, central government agencies, the NHS, and the other providers of service, the care homes, and all the decision makers and the chains of decision making that affect the welfare, the well-being, and safety and security of individuals at the receiving end of the or ends of the decisions that are being made in their name allegedly. Any student, any observer of the behavior of hospitals, the NHS hospitals over the last decades, any independent, objective observer, that is to say, somebody who is going by the evidence only, not by any agenda prompting any conclusion, but going by following the evidence in front of them, would know that the culture in the hospitals, in the NHS controlled, NHS branded, NHS named hospitals, the culture has been of disconnection with the people, the patients, disconnection with the needs, and seriously dominated by prejudice and racism. So when the Star on what is this? Daily Star on Sunday says hundreds of deaths every day here soon. I mean, what is this trying to say? This is not something that it would say if it understood the importance of accountability. It should be focusing not on deaths in that particular piece, but on the level of accountability, level of transparency, and the level of knowledge of the facts at each stage. What went wrong? What are the things that were done wrong in the care homes at every stage? So that is something that would save lives. And that kind of culture of accountability and the practice of accountability by the media, which is the communication kind of vehicle between people and about people and about the society generally, and that is the biggest block that influences the gullibles. That is the biggest block that influences the gullibles, whether the gullibles are kind of reached and targeted by other comparatively minor media or not, or directly. Because if the care homes, which is the one that they've been talking about more, that the care homes are going to become again the centers of the maximum, the majority of the casualty of a new kind of spread of the infection. Who are the people that are entered there? What kind of conditions are they in? Who are the people that decide to put them in the positions that they are put in? Where do they come from? What are the histories in terms of the referrals, various referrals that various, quote, decision makers or authority figures, so-called, made about them, affecting them? And who are the people that are answering? Who are the people deciding these, making the decisions? Who are they actually accountable to? Who are they accounting to for their decisions? And who overall takes a view of the totality of the decisions about any particular care home? And what were the actual interactions between the relations, relatives, families, children of the care home people mostly, or relations and relatives of the care home peoples and their families? What was the quality of the interaction each time? And what value was given to the people concerned about their loved ones pushed into care homes? And then where inside the care homes were the distributions, the allocations of the various stages of the so-called treatment or not? And who decided everything? I mean, who were the people making the decisions affecting every single aspect? So there is nothing. It only says Neil Ferguson is saying it. It says the former government advisor. Remember, Neil Ferguson was forced to resign that particular post after his girlfriend, the married girlfriend, was reportedly allowed to visit him more than once, breaking the lockdown. And the breaking girlfriend, married girlfriend, visiting the married Neil Ferguson, was reportedly also extensively reported as being of a kind of left-wing orientation. Now, what happened to her? And what happened to the need to make sure that people don't actually disobey the law that they insist or is generally applied to most ordinary people? Who is monitoring that? And there is nothing in the papers about the monitoring. Objectively, it has to be objective monitoring and fair monitoring, and monitoring in a way that actually saves lives, protects people from getting infected and getting ill. So where is all of that? There is no list in the Daily Star on Sunday. There is no list in the Mail on Sunday. There is no list in the Sunday Mirror. And there is no list in the People or the Express. And there is nothing in the Observer as far as I can see. And we have actually we have not got the copy of the Boris Graph, Sunday Boris Graph today, because the outlet where we bought the Boris papers didn't have the Boris Graph as far as we can see. So we'll have to make another trip to the likely outlet to see if they've got the So they're saying that 10,000 pound fines for failing to self-isolate as infections soar. And there is a demand for mass testing because the kind of testing is the one that they're all focusing on, mass testing. And they're saying that Britain is on the brink, dismay as nation faces up to prospect of new lockdown. And they've got a piece about other countries preparing for the second or a threat of a second wave of the infection. And they've got a piece about Johnson getting the priorities wrong, according to the scientists. Because it says hands, face, space. These are the kind of topics that they're using to report that Boris Johnson has been found to have got the priorities wrong. And then they've got a piece about the 35,000 pound COVID testing machine in school, only in the private sector. And there is the continuation of this coverage of the schools tension. Town versus gown tensions grow over threat of infection rate as new term starts. And they're saying that it is time to try some luxury personal protection gearing because face masks are so last spring. It's a kind of trendy headline. So last spring, if it's like a kind of game. And the Royal Academy is in a cruel dilemma. Sell Michelangelo or lose 150 jobs. And they've got another piece for Keir Starmer, the promotion that the donor who quit over anti-Semitism is set to rejoin the Labour Party. And there is Barbara Ellen congratulating the latest woman making allegation against Donald Trump over sexual abuse and groping. I'm just reading this to show that there is absolutely no report, no investigation by the observer on the actual sequences and actual connections, the actual conduct and the behavior on the ground, as I said about the Daily Star on Sunday when I was looking at that one. The care home admissions and the actual start to finish or A to Z of this spread of the virus and the various contacts. What are the details? Where do these start and where do they get kind of dangerous and affect people's health and do severe damage? And this is the piece that the Guardian had on the website a few days ago, which is that tenants are quitting city centers. So the landlords are slashing rents by up to 20%. Race to suburbia and a lack of foreign students see the demand for private rentable property going down. But it will go down even further when they start the evictions tomorrow, because most people who are going to be evicted are not going to be able to afford, don't have the money or the resources or the permission of the court system to make any negotiated kind of deal based on what they have as part of the rent. Now, this is something that refers to rent arrears building up. And this is the point where we can take a look again at the behavior of Tower Hamlets Council first and then Newham Council second, about deliberately creating rent arrears, and with the collusion of the Deprivation, Want and Poverty Department, that is to say DWP, which is otherwise called the Department for Work and Pensions, but in practice it is the Deprivation, Want and Poverty Creation. The Tower Hamlets Council, when it handed over council properties, thousands of council properties, first to the gang of crooks called Haque, Popla Haque, between 2005 to 2006-7. And about the same time, it gave a less number, but significant numbers of council stock, housing stock, to the second gang of crooks called Tower Hamlets Community Housing. And this second gang of crooks was headed by a gangster criminal who was in place as a manager at the expense of housing needs and housing rights inside the Tower Hamlets Council for Bethnal Green area. This criminal is called Mike Tyrrell. This terrible Tyrrell was in place in 1990s when I had to do a campaign against a victim of a racist attack. And my campaign was not directed against Mike, the racist criminal Tyrrell. My campaign was directed at holding the council accountable for its failure to safeguard a victim of racism on a council estate, which was in Bethnal Green. The short of it is that because I launched a successful campaign in defense of the victim family, Mike Tyrrell, and we're talking about 1996 exactly, Mike Tyrrell concluded, totally wrongly, and because of his racist prejudice, and because of his awareness of his own racist role and outlook, that I had targeted him in my campaign. I had not. I didn't even know the criminal at the time. But he wasn't going to assume that I had no agenda against him. So what he did, he set about in 96 in retaliation for my campaign, effectively in helping the victims of racism on a council estate in Bethnal Green in 1996. So Mike Tyrrell decided that he would ask those below the line in the management and the line management chain to persuade them to evict me from my council flat. There was no reason. The only reason was that he thought that I had targeted him. I had not. Now I'm talking now what? Nearly 25 years after the incident. But that is what the case was. I had not targeted him, and I'm still very clear that I had no reason to target him because I had not known him and I had not connected him personally with anything that I was campaigning against in defense of the particular family victims of the racist attack. That victim was called Dilwar, and Dilwar was nearly killed by stabbing attacks that took place on the estate in Bethnal Green. And so I was approached by a former Tower Hamlets councillor who requested me to help the family, because that particular former councillor was a councillor. At the time, he was a councillor for that area where the family lived. So Mike, the racist criminal liar Tyrrell, issued a memo dated the 23rd of December 1996. Just August, September, October, November. There's just under 4 months since I began the campaign in support of the family of Dilwar and of Dilwar himself. And so what he did, in that memo, Mike, the racist liar criminal, Tyrrell, said that I should be evicted under any excuse. That is effectively what he said. I'm not reading the exact text, but that is the email that he sent. That is the email he sent to Colin Cormack and a man called Brown, Keith Brown. Those are among the number of people inside the council that Mike, the racist liar Tyrrell, sent an email to asking them to evict me. And there was no reason to evict me. Now, I shall come to the details of the state of that estate at the time, and I shall connect the various collusions by the police, by Mike Tyrrell and the gangs there and the council. Because all of them decided to make it difficult for me to stay in my council flat. Not because I had kind of defaulted on any rent or anything, but they decided that I was doing too much politics. And the only politics I was doing, and I ever do, is to defend other people. And at that time, one of the other people that I was defending was the family of Dilwar and Dilwar himself. I had not known them before, but it appeared that they were known to my kind of parents from another kind of state that they were living in before in Tower Hamlets. But that was afterwards. So Mike Tyrrell sent on the 23rd of December 1996 a memo to Colin Cormack and Keith Brown, asking them to evict me. Now, as there was no reason, they had then to find a reason to evict me, which is to create an arrear in rent. Now, as the council property was eligible for housing rent payment under housing benefit scheme, they created an arrear in my housing benefit. So the person who was responsible for making decisions in the council for paying housing benefits, Steve Hill, you will remember Steve Hill from previous references. Steve Hill, another racist criminal liar, then colluded with the racist criminal liar, Mike Tyrrell. And so Keith Brown was given the pretext. Colin Cormack was given the pretext to kind of use rent arrears because Steve Hill withheld payment of my housing benefit. And that created the pretext immediately for the Tower Hamlets community housing to say that I had a rent arrear. And this was put to Keith Bennett and Keith Brown and the other one who is in charge of, at the time, in charge of the housing options, Colin Cormack. So Keith Brown and Colin Cormack and Steve Hill and Mike Tyrrell locally conspired to create a rent arrears in order to evict me. The details of the eviction, the details of the damage that they did will be gone through in another edition. But that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about in the context of this. Now, how many people are being targeted for eviction proceedings tomorrow, starting tomorrow, who have been intentionally made to appear on the records as having an arrear? Now, having an arrear is treated as almost like an offense, although it has nothing to do with the behavior of the person being accused of having an arrear, or whose records are being kind of created in a way that they have got rent arrears. This is a very familiar and oft used abuse of the kind of powers by the decision-making personnel. In this case, the decision makers started with Mike Tyrrell, who was worried that I was calling him a racist because of the attack on the murderous attack that took place on the council estate on Dilwar, the victim. So he decided to make life difficult for me and to make me appear as a person in rent arrears. And so therefore the others in the council wrongly and untruthfully and dishonestly and equally racistly as Mike Tyrrell had been motivated in circulating that memo on the 23rd of December 1996. They took appropriate action as they saw it to harass me and to give me notice and to make it even more uncertain for me to do anything by way of the campaign, in anything by way of taking any rest, by way of doing other things that I had to do in order to seek the various claims that I had against many people about damages, compensations, and the rest. So this is what happened in December 1996 as a result of my standing up for a victim family victimized by racists who nearly killed a member of the family called Dilwar. And I could not seek any remedies through the court system because the court system would not allow me to bring a case. And the details of the court system that I have been talking about previously are from that kind of experience. You make an application, but you are not given the permission to actually proceed. So I tried to stop the council by applying to the council, to the court. And the court at that time, in late 1996 and early 1997, was still at Shoreditch. The nearest county court was Shoreditch County Court, near the Old Street Junction. The county court would not list my case, my application, and the various details, the factual details that I submitted to the court as part of the application would not be addressed by the court, which it should have. And Henrietta Manners may or may not have seen my court applications at the time, but she was there. She was very much a district judge in that court or that area of the courts. Because she had lied in 1993, November 1993, when I had been falsely given a false information by the court to go to court on a Wednesday, the 10th of November 1993. And it was not a hearing, but they sent me a letter saying there was a hearing. And the hearing should have been about my challenging the decision to grant the permission to execute the eviction of me from my previous address. When I went to the court, there was no hearing, and I could not find any listing of the hearing which I had received a letter about, but I could not see on the list any hearing of that particular case. And I was told by one of the staff in the court entrance or at the reception to go to a particular court, which I did, and I could not see the names on the outside of the courtroom. This took all of this, by going there and coming back to my home, took about 2 hours or 3 hours. And by the time I got there, there were 2 Metropolitan Police women outside my door and telling me that they would arrest me if I tried to get into my house. Now, this is the reference to Henrietta Manners and the Shoreditch County Court criminality. So this is happening in 1993. And then I was now talking about 3 years later, 1996, another eviction. And the previous eviction was not anything to do with my having done anything wrong. It was the consequence of the Royal London Hospital putting their property on auction. Property where I was a resident, a tenant, not a tenant officially, but an occupier. The official tenant was some other member of my family. I was paying the rent, but the name was not my name on the list of tenants. But it didn't matter. Legally, I was occupying there and I was paying the rent every week. And so what happened with the Michael Tyrrell attack on me for helping a family of victims of racism was that I was then kind of subjected to a series of court applications for evicting me. And the pretext was an arrear. So when I confronted Steve Hill and asked him and demanded to know why he had stopped the housing benefit, he said that the DWP had stopped what I was on at the time was income support, I suppose. And there was no change of my circumstances at all. So therefore, the DWP had no reason to stop my income support. But that's what Steve Hill said. Now, there are 2 lies in there. First of all, the housing benefit is calculated based on the particular tenant's circumstances, what is called means testing. If the particular tenant has not enough means to pay the rent, then they are eligible to housing benefit. Let's put it this way. And I had not been receiving any income, even if I had been on income support. I had not been receiving any income that exceeded the amount, the limitation. So I was exempt from having to pay the rent because I didn't have the necessary income. So Steve Hill had no reason to stop my housing benefit, and therefore Mike Tyrrell had no reason to treat that as my fault, and the others in the council had no right or evidence to say that I had done anything unlawful or illegal or wrong or intentionally unlawful, illegal or wrong or negligent. My circumstances had remained in terms of income absolutely unchanged. So when Mike Tyrrell did that and the process of repeat applications to the Shoreditch County Court began against me seeking to possess my flat, I had been diverted from the campaigns and the other activities in order to defend the tenancy and the occupation against the wrongly brought harassing kind of pretext of an eviction process. And when I went to the court, Henrietta Manners had already been in place for several years because she is the one who gave the order to evict me from my place in 1993 in the first place. And she did that by ignoring all the evidence that I had submitted, especially, and that is where Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and Bill Gates come in. I put the evidence, which was the evidence, that at my address in New Road, I was working throughout the time collecting evidence. And I was not receiving any housing benefit or anything at that time because I only applied for housing benefit in 1996 when I got the flat in E1 for the first time. Until then, I never had asked for any housing benefit about my residence in New Road. So when I went to the county court and told Henrietta Manners, or wrote to the county court and gave extensive evidence that I was working as a writer, as a researcher, as a campaigner, and addressing serious issues affecting other people's housing, other people's rights and employment and all the rest of it. I expected that to be treated as evidence, facts, and I expected them to quiz me or interrogate me or ask me questions to provide further evidence or clarification. I was not asked to do any of that. And the person who gained control of the freehold of the property because of the sale at auction by the Royal London Hospital, that person also did not provide any truthful evidence. In fact, that criminal submitted a totally false claim against me, saying that I had been campaigning against Saidan Rushdie. Imagine that. Now, he was obviously over exploiting the propensity on the part of the court system to believe anything said against a Muslim. That is what happened. That is the evidence I'm going by. I had not, and I still have not, spoken on any mainstream media about Saidan Rushdie. I'm doing now, but not at that time, not in 1990 or 1991 or 1992. I had my opinion about Rushdie, but I had not published anything on the television. I had short kind of footage about me speaking on issues on television, the BBC, ITV, whatever was the mainstream then, but I had not commented on Rushdie. And I am saying now, this is nearly 30 years after the criminal lied about me speaking about Rushdie. The reason I did not speak on any of those occasions about Rushdie was because I was not satisfied that the other people who were campaigning against Rushdie had got it right. I thought that they had got tactical issues that they needed to sort out, and they were also totally playing into the hands of the racists and anti-Muslims who had been wanting to show the Muslim opponents and critics of Rushdie as extremists and violent and all the rest of it. So I did not want to get involved in that context with the others, just to avoid misunderstanding and misrepresentation. But here, in his submission through his solicitor, whoever the solicitor was, this criminal submitted a claim that I had been seen on television against Rushdie. And that time, the atmosphere was of extreme intolerance against Muslims, commenting or criticizing or protesting against Rushdie because of what happened in Bradford. And that is exactly what I wanted to distance myself from. But it didn't make any difference to the criminal, who included a reference, false reference, saying that I had been campaigning against Rushdie. Now, this is the work of Paul the criminal liar Barma. So if the criminal liar is watching this or has been hearing about this, he must understand that he will have to account for this lie, and he will have to account for the billions of pounds of damage that he caused. So when Henrietta Manners read that, or must have been told about that, she signed the eviction order against me. And she did that not because I had done anything wrong, but because she thought that I was campaigning against Salman Rushdie. I wasn't. I had my opinion, but I had not been campaigning. If I had been campaigning, I would have been the first one to say that, but I wasn't. And so therefore, the Henrietta Manners was in place 30 years ago in the Shoreditch County Court, where she lied against me, and she issued an order that affected my libraries, my work, and my manuscripts. And those manuscripts are symptomatic, representative aspects and parts of the work, my work, that has been repeatedly attacked under any pretext and excuse. And that work is worth in value more than the combined wealth in 2020 prices that reportedly is owned by Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, Mike and Bill Gates, and Elon Musk, to name only four. And the value is, first of all, in the quality of my opinion and observation, my philosophy, my strategy, and thought about the solution to world's hunger problem, world's migration problems, and world's war problems. Think about these. If you solve all of these, you have achieved more in one day in the actions that are related to my prescription and my opinion and my program, which is what I've been working on. In one day, it exceeds the combined reported wealth possessed by those four. That is what I mean. Nobody else is saying this. Nobody else has said this in the last 30 years. And nobody else is currently saying this as far as I can access. And so therefore, what damage these criminals and racists have been doing is not just against me and my rights, but against the whole future of humanity, the future of the planet, future of the environment, future of society, and future safety and well-being and welfare of all creatures on the planet. So we shall be continuing this with the next lot of the newspapers this Sunday today, 20th of September 2020. This is coming to 11:26 GMT on Sunday, the 26th of September 2020. We shall continue in part C very soon.